Hello and welcome to the SHRM Labs WorkplaceTech Spotlight. My name is Hadeel Al-tashi, manager at SHRM Labs. I will be your host for this SHRM Labs series where we shine a spotlight on some of the most interesting future of work innovators, innovations, and issues of today. Before we get started, some general announcements and housekeeping items. The Workplace Tech community is now available to all SHRM members for free. This is your guide to all things HR technology related. If you are a member, please visit workplacetechcommunity.shrm.org to learn more. Our semifinals for our 2024 Better Workplaces Challenge Cup is scheduled for Tuesday, May 21st. We will have 5 winning startups from round 1 present their workplace tech solutions live to a panel of HR and tech experts. Then we will determine which 3 solutions will move on to the finals, which will take place in person at our annual conference. And these startups will have a chance to win $50,000. Be sure to visit betterworkplaceschallengecup.com to learn more and register for our upcoming event. For those of you watching on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, please share this stream, tag SHRM, use the hashtags SHRM Labs and Workplace Tech, and just keep the conversation going and engage the chat. So now, as industries undergo digital transformation and automation, skill development becomes paramount to ensure workforce remains relevant and competitive. Today, we're going to discuss talent transformation through upskilling. Joining us to talk about this topic is Steve Gilman, co-founder and CEO of OneRange. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Happy Friday. Always a pleasure chatting, Hadeel.
Absolutely. And we're excited to have you. So, Steve, I know you, the audience doesn't. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so, I grew up with an engineering background. I have a non-traditional background. You'll hear some of that come out in some of the answers and some of the conversations today. I was a professional baseball player as my first job out of school. I was an intelligence officer that worked for the Department of Defense. And then I went into the business world after attending graduate school. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I enjoy working with different categories and learning as quick as possible to disrupt an industry for the better. And I started OneRange, which we'll get into today to help with company upskilling and really automating what companies do for their employees.
Awesome. So, Steve, why is corporate skill development so important today?
Yeah, I think there's really three things that we see together, and we'll kind of, the why now question is really interesting. We look at it more or less as a kaleidoscope, right? When these 3 sectors come together in an industry as important as upskilling, we really have to take a deep dive look into it. So 3 things we talk about is, are companies ready for it? Are employees ready for it as individuals? And is the technology there, or is there a movement in technology that makes this irresistible, right? It has to be done. So first, companies with strong learning cultures, just embedded into what they do, recruiting, retaining, and making folks more productive, are 52% more productive and 17% more profitable, according to a Deloitte study. That's huge, right? And we'll talk about some of the reasons why that is. So companies need to do this for their employees. The employee level, the demand for upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling is there. 94% of employees stick around at a company longer if they have the right professional development tools. And 82% of individuals at companies believe they need to upskill within the next year just to stay competitive in their current job role. That's huge. So we sense it. Now we're starting to see that come to life. And the reason is technology, the rapid pace of technology, the use of software, the way that we work every single day. What I mean by that is most people learn in the professional development world when they need to, not when they're told to, when they actually need to. So think about those times that you're stuck in Excel trying to format data, or look for that little data validation button that we all know is there, but don't know where to find it. In that moment, if I spend more than 15, 20 minutes stuck on anything that helps me do my job, it might be important for me to go upskill in that area, take a course, get a book, read an article even. And so when you look at that, people have to do that constantly just to keep up with their average flow. An average engineer coming out of school with technology skills has a half-life of skills of about 4 to 6 months. That means the people that graduate here in May, in the fall, will be in a mode where they have to upskill. Otherwise, they won't be proficient at their job. And that's because they're using the latest and greatest.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. It's crazy how fast, we have to upskill talent, and how technology is constantly evolving, and also at the same time becoming irrelevant, and we just have to constantly upskill. So what outcomes can businesses expect from investing in skill development?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that my co-founder and I became entrepreneurs in this space is because we saw such a tangible outcome of doing things the right way. So if we're able to align the needs of a company with individual preferences and needs of an individual, we hit the mark, right? And not only is it first level effects, it's secondary and tertiary level effects. What do I mean by that? Let's look at the employee journey into a company that does a really good job at upskilling. From recruiting, being able to differentiate between other positions and other companies out there with a great program is going to be highly attractive to individuals, especially the younger generation.
Mm.
The ability to make folks more productive in their job roles by upskilling is going to have a huge business effect directly to the bottom line, as we talked about a little on that Deloitte case study. And then at the end of the day, retention. And retention is really fun because when people are learning, they tend to be top talent. They tend to be hungry and thirsty for more. They tend to also be more productive, right? And they tend to recruit their friends and doing everything else. So just an interesting way that we kind of put it together to make it really tangible for return on investment. An average 1,000-person company that is in the technology sector will have 13.2% churn per year. That means because of one reason or another, 132 people will leave the company, right? And they'll have to be replaced. And if you're trying to grow, you're going to have to hire more than 132 people. The company that invests $500 per person will be able to break even on that investment by just retaining 13 people every year, right? So you're reducing your churn by 10%, 13 out of 132. And that is just breaking even on pouring money into upskilling. So that doesn't even take into account the first level and secondary levels that we mentioned. That's just the tertiary level, but it's very clear and very evident that companies do it well, retain that top talent, have to search for less, have more institutional knowledge and everything above.
Got it. And you've seen this through OneRange. You've seen so many programs. Are all upskilling programs created equally?
Certainly not, right? And I think the fundamental issue that we're seeing right now across the landscape, regardless of the industry, regardless of the physical footprint, where you're headquartered, where you're working from, is that there's no great definition of an upskilling program, right? And we found this out early because you can talk to the head of a company and you can talk to the employee, and there can be completely different mindsets. Now, HR and people ops are stuck in the middle, right? And they're trying to put all of this together. But generally, it's really hard to go into a company and say you have a great upskilling program because you have X, Y, and Z. There's no formal definition. There will be. Give us 3 to 5 years, right? Kind of as an industry to put it together to know what works and what doesn't now that we're getting the data. One of the biggest issues that we typically see is a disconnect between the company heads and the employees. Those companies tend to rely on larger learning management systems that tend towards compliance and internal training, which are needed, but are very different than upskilling employees. And so if you're relying on those systems, you're pouring a lot of time and effort into administrating them, and you're finding that the courses that you're selecting and sending to people, especially if it's e-learning, just aren't hitting or isn't being utilized, there's a fundamental disconnect. And that's probably the number one reason that we know upskilling isn't hitting like it should. And there's plenty of potential to kind of open that door and build a program.
Interesting. Now, what can businesses do to be more proactive in addressing the growing need for upskilling?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of preface this with the first thing before designing, developing, building out a program, selecting partners in that program, be it content providers or technology, is to be understanding of your own learning culture. What are people thirsty for? What are they looking at? The way that people typically learn, right? And that goes across different functions. Engineers, marketing, finance folks, they all learn a little bit differently, but there is a culture, whether you continuously learn, whether you knock it out at the beginning of the year, whether you're encouraged to do it, but it's not mandatory, all these type of things. Now, here's a little hack that we like to give, and we like to do ourselves within our own company and other companies to kind of understand right in the beginning. Don't do the big surveys where you go out to everybody, you ask them to fill out the appropriate information, and you're given that. There's a lot of bias in who actually fills out the form as to whether they care or don't really care. And the mass majority of people are in the middle that said, hey, if I had a great upskilling program, I'd participate. If we don't, I'm not going to. So here's the hack. Just go interview, to understand your own company, 20 people that just came on board, let's say within the last year. Now, don't interview executives. They tend to talk about the vision or what they want to be. That doesn't help us here today and now. Don't talk to managers who have been around for a while in the culture. Not that their opinion doesn't matter, but we're just getting the broad strokes. What's the learning culture right now? Remember I talked about kind of the recruiting, productivity, retaining folks. The 20 people you're going to talk to that just came into your company in the last year are going to have a good sense of what they're recruited with. The people they talk to that really sold them on the company, be it HR, their hiring manager, or colleagues, right? Or even Glassdoor, right? What resources they approach to look at this, and all through a lens of skill development. And then when they got to the company and you spent your first 3 months here, awesome, we have a great onboarding program. What tools do we have to continuously upskill you? And do you see a future here where you're accelerating beyond where your colleagues are that went to companies that you did not? When you do that, you get a real clean, crisp understanding of what people perceive in the market in terms of the job market, what people are expecting, and what they're actually getting, right? And a lot of times we see a disconnect somewhere in there. I was told this, I don't see it exists. I was told nothing, but we have a fantastic program, but the way I see it's like this. 20 people is enough to understand exactly where you are on a learning culture basis. It's not in the words that are on your recruiting platforms. It's actually in the feeling and the sense that people get that you have them, that you're investing in them. And that's the place to start, right? And building the program kind of starts from there, but it all becomes a little more clear how to involve managers and executives from there.
Got it. And as an expert in this space, Steve, what are key signs that you see in successful upskilling programs?
Yeah. So we look at a few different aspects and the threads that we see in general, and this should apply to every company across the board, right? Any team shooting for business goals, relying on strategy to do so. 4 key elements. It's got to be open. It's got to be accessible for everyone. There have to be no barriers, and you have to leverage the employee-manager relationship. And I'll just run through those really quickly. Open means that you're non-restrictive. Things that are open, professional development stipends. Go get what you need. We'll reimburse you. Ask your manager, make sure it's a good fit. The more restrictive something is, the less likely that an employee is going to engage and engage in a meaningful way, right? This is about someone's time and how they're upskilling, not just about what's going to look good on their resume, degree, and things like that. The second one has to be accessible for everyone. And we see this all the time. OneRange as a platform does a really good job using technology to get out the sentiment around why people are upskilling and why they're doing it. So let's take a quick example. Someone in operations that's in charge of onboarding a company into the services or technology might want a Salesforce certificate. So Salesforce is the CRM. And the reason they might want that, and they'll tell their manager about it, is because I don't understand the software that the salespeople use to tell me what to do when I onboard this client. And I know I haven't talked about it before, but this is the reason. And so largely when you make it accessible to everyone, not only does it become part of your culture, but the people who are a little more shy to step up to say, I need this resource to do well at my job for whatever reason, right? I think it's too expensive. I don't want to admit that I've been lacking proficiency here. That comes out in a technology system. So we have great data behind that, make it accessible to everyone. The other two pieces, no barrier for access. We've seen a lot of issues with payment and administration, right? So these are the large companies that say, we'll do tuition reimbursement. You can upskill in whatever you want. But by the way, you front it on a credit card, and then we'll pay you back 3 months later once you get an A or B in the designated course. Not only is there a lot of administration that goes through, there's also a lot of float for 22-year-olds. Putting down a credit card and floating on that is really tough. And so there's a barrier. Make it as frictionless as possible for people to get the resources they need. And the last one, and we don't talk about this enough, but when we see a good upskilling program, we see it more or less decentralized, meaning that all the empowerment gets down to the functional level. So Hadeel, if you and I are on a finance team and you're my manager, there's a good chance that between you and I, we're going to be able to figure out the best resource to help me with my Excel skills, right? And we can communicate, and on a daily basis we do. So you understand if I like books, courses, if I just want to knock it out, if I want to take my time, if I'm able to work with you on that, as opposed to getting something assigned from a central location, a central resource, we're going to hit the mark every single time, right? And you may have ideas, or I may be empowered to give you the ideas, but leveraging that relationship. Hadeel is in charge of making sure it aligns with company strategy and empowers me. I'm in charge of making sure that it's productive for me. And if the company can access and control that data, then wow, you really have something to go for.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining all of that. Steve, are there any recommendations or resources or anything that you can share with the audience today?
Yeah. So I think there's three ways that we like to get some of the industry knowledge and data out there to help companies upskill. One, feel free to email me. I have a deck on the latest industry trends, including why we're seeing such a skill gap over the past few years and what we'll see in the next 10 years. And I'm happy to send that information over. The other thing is on the OneRange website, onerange.co/blog, you'll find a host of different resources. We usually talk about best practices when you're doing any component of these upskilling programs, whether you're issuing stipends, whether you're looking for training providers, what to do and where to go. And we publish a lot of great articles on folks that have been doing it right in the form of case studies. The last one, if you're a SHRM member, and this is kind of where we start, go to the SHRM Knowledge Center. This is the big industry data that you need to understand at a macro level to understand how to work within your company to make the case for building an upskilling program. Go to the Knowledge Center, sign in, and then start looking up things like professional development, employee benefits, upskilling, new skilling, reskilling, learning and development, and start to see where the trends are going. What companies are offering it? What's the employee sentiment around it? Why it's so important for young people just coming out of school to have programs in front of them to enable their professional career.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And I appreciate the shout out. SHRM does have a lot of resources and reports. And there's also beauty in the community. They're so amazing. We have an amazing community of HR leaders and experts that we can all learn from. So definitely take advantage of the resources that's available to you at SHRM. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have here today, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful conversation. We hope that the audience and everyone listening has enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about OneRange and how they are innovating in the workplace, please visit onerange.co. And if you want to connect with Steve himself, you can find him on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with him as well if you want to tap into the resources that are available at OneRange. If you enjoyed this live stream, please share it. Use the hashtags SHRM Labs, Workplace Tech, tag SHRM as well, and keep the conversation going. Let us know what's top of mind so we can keep adding more value to these conversations moving forward. And visit shrmlabs.com to sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date with upcoming programming and content on Future of Work. We will see you next time. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great weekend. Take care.